Aaron, first to you. It sounded like Benjamin Netanyahu endorsed the entirety of this plan. He kept saying that people are asking him over and over again for a plan for the day after in Gaza, and he said, well, here's the plan. Was that what it sounded like to you?
Critical step, he said, toward ending the war and expanding the peace. I think Netanyahu played this incredibly smart. He's taken the president's 21 points, so-called principles for peace, and sort of made them congruent, is how I would say, not redefined them, made them congruent with the 4 or 5 principles that he's already sold to the Israeli cabinet. I think the sequencing here is going to be extraordinarily difficult. How do you actually get this thing rolling? Hostages need to be freed. The Israelis, under certain circumstances, will withdraw to a perimeter. And then the international board, the Board of Peace, as the president defined it, chaired by one Donald J. Trump, will then seek to disarm, demilitarize, and ensure that Hamas plays no military or political role in Gaza. I mean, I think Benjamin Netanyahu had no alternative. I'm not sure he's terribly happy with the outcome. And I do believe the core question for Netanyahu now will be, how much of this can he actually cooperate and implement while thinking about the platform he needs to use to get reelected? Ending the war in Gaza, freeing the hostages, crippling, if not destroying Hamas, while maintaining Israel's overall responsibility for security in Gaza, and then restoring relations with the Qataris, with the Abraham Accord country, with the prospect of an Israeli-Saudi deal somewhere out there in the future, that may be enough for a compelling election run in 2026. But again, Katie, I think every one of these points, everything we've heard today, is going to be negotiated, argued about, redefined. I'm still left with no real certainty that this roadmap, that's really what it is going to achieve the outcome that I hope somehow that for the hostages, their families, and civilians of Gaza can be achieved.
Yeah, but hold on. There are a couple things in here that what is the argument or what is the negotiation on? No one will be forced to leave Gaza, and those who wish to leave will be free to do so and free to return. We will encourage people to stay and offer them the opportunity to build a better Gaza. I mean, there are people in the far-right government in Israel who don't want any Palestinians left in Gaza. And then the other, the 16th point here is Israel will not occupy or annex Gaza. How does he sell that to Ben-Gvir and Smotrich? Can he? And if he cannot, is this a platform for him to maybe make a new alliance, make a new government?
I mean, the president said that they didn't want to take questions because there are, quote, documents to be signed. This, to me, is, again, something of a mystery. Who's signing what? Is the Prime Minister of Israel actually going to commit himself on paper to an actual document? Presumably, there will be signatories by key Arab states. So that's something to be watched. And whether or not you and I are reading the 21 points that have been published by various media and news outlets do they in fact contain all of the details of this plan? As far as Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, he will try to persuade them that, in effect, we're not leaving Gaza. If Hamas does not accept this, we will continue the war. And we have no intention right now, unless Hamas is demilitarized, de-radicalized, essentially decommissioned, taken out of commission, we're not going to withdraw from Gaza. All of those points are well within Smotrich's and Ben-Gvir's capacity to accept. And you heard what the Prime Minister said about Palestinian statehood and recognition, and the PA, which needs to be reformed essentially out of existence as far as Benjamin Netanyahu is concerned. So it'll be tricky. He's freed until October 19th when the Knesset resumes from any effort to dissolve the government. And again, navigating the space between Donald Trump and the current coalition, I think is going to be Netanyahu's toughest challenge.
Yeah. OK, so Vaughn, what happens now if you get the Israelis on board, and it appears they're at least moving in that direction? We'll see about the details, as Aaron was saying. Does Steve Witkoff then take this to the Qataris to deliver to Hamas? Do we have an idea of what the next step is?
Right. I am actually told by one source, and there's a lot more reporting here to be done, that the administration will turn to the Qataris to help mediate this over the next 72 hours with Hamas. Of course, that is why there was so much focus and attention here, not just from President Trump, but also from Prime Minister Netanyahu, acknowledging that there could and should be a trilateral relationship between the U.S., Israel, and Qatar moving forward to mitigate future conflicts. Of course, this comes just 3 weeks after Israel struck sovereign territory in Doha and killed a Qatari civilian. And what you heard, though, from Prime Minister Netanyahu there was a recognition of the event that killed that a Qatari citizen, but then also an acknowledgement that Qatar could be a key partner, and acknowledging that there are grievances that still exist, a great many of them, to directly quote Netanyahu, but one in which there is a realization that over these next 72 hours, the Qataris are going to play specifically a very important role here. As Aaron was suggesting, the demands that Hamas must agree to, of course, we would expect Hamas to argue that they are steep here, because what you did not hear from Prime Minister Netanyahu was any quick commitment for IDF to leave Gaza. Instead, repeatedly, he directly suggested that there are going to be security forces there in Gaza, quote, for the foreseeable future. I think Netanyahu said that phrase 2 or 3 times here. And yet what is being requested of Hamas is effectively to disarm. And so I think that the stakes of this are quite high, but there's that 72-hour window. And I don't think that we can ignore what was a clear warning from the Israeli prime minister. He said, quote, if Hamas rejects your plan, or if they supposedly accept it and basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself, effectively suggesting it does not need the U.S. head nod or sign off on any of its future strikes. But if this week Hamas does not take the steps of returning hostages to Israel, that there will be a further aggression and that the war will only escalate from there.